How's it going, everybody? It's Captain Trips 2017 and happy Halloween to everybody. Are you ready for Halloween? I am. I got my trick-or-treat bucket and I got my costume. I'm Crazy Spoonhead and I got a spoon on my head and give me some candy. Well, enough of that silliness. Besides costumes and candy, my favorite thing about Halloween is watching tons of horror movies. And I developed my love of horror movies as a little kid with the help of some local personalities. You see, I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and across the river was Detroit, Michigan, and we had some really great local personalities on television and radio. And the three gentlemen I'm going to talk about today were horror hosts in Detroit that aired in the 70s and 80s, and they were very entertaining. Everybody loved them back then, and they certainly helped me develop a love for good horror movies and an even bigger love for bad horror movies. Now these guys put on some great skits, and if the movie did get too scary, they would help lighten the mood a little bit. So without further ado, I'd like to start the presentation, our little salute to Detroit horror hosts. Now this first guy I'd like to talk about, he wasn't a native to the Detroit area. He actually started off in Cleveland, Ohio. But once he came to Detroit, he became so popular that I had to include him in this video. He's still a big hit today. So ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Ghoul.
The Ghoul was created by Cleveland native Ron Swede. Swede got his start in television at the age of 13 when he appeared in a gorilla suit at a live appearance of famed Cleveland horror host Ghoulardi. Ghoulardi noticed the young Swede and brought him up onto the stage, and within weeks, Ron Swede was Ghoulardi's production assistant. On a side note, Ghoulardi was portrayed by Cleveland actor Ernie Anderson, who was the father of acclaimed film director Paul Thomas Anderson. A few years after Anderson retired the Ghoulardi character, Ron Swede approached him with the notion to revive the beloved horror show. Ernie Anderson declined, but gave Swede his blessing to do his own show, which is exactly what he did. The Ghoul show premiered on Cleveland's WKBD-TV Channel 61 in 1971, and soon he was syndicated to a few other cities. Unfortunately, the Ghoul show didn't gain much popularity in most of these markets, but in Detroit he was an instant smash. He premiered on WKBD-TV 50 and later jumped back and forth between Channel 50 and WXON-TV 20. The Ghoul show had a much more relaxed attitude towards television production. Often, crew members could be seen looking on in amusement at the Ghoul's antics. The Ghoul didn't just break the fourth wall, he tore it down permanently. The shows were very loosely scripted and seemed less like a television show and more like a party where cameras just happened to be present. Often, rock music would play as the Ghoul would maniacally address the crowd and his cast of characters. The most fondly remembered of the Ghoul's sidekicks would have to be Froggy.
Just get away from me, will you, sickie? I'm in no mood for you today.
He would show up to pluck his magic twanger and would always end up being abused by the Ghoul. In addition to the abuse he heaped on Froggy, the Ghoul also enjoyed blowing up random things with firecrackers, which he affectionately referred to as boom booms. The Ghoul's segments weren't the only thing affected by his adolescent humor. He would often insert it into the movies themselves, adding bits of dialogue here and there and the occasional sound effect. Considering that most of the movies he aired were completely awful, it was definitely an improvement. The Ghoul has not been on television since 2003, but he remains active until this day. You can always drop by theghoul.com to say hello, or if you're in Cleveland or Detroit at the time, you can catch him at one of his public appearances.
Now our next host was one of the funniest in my opinion. The guy was just uproaringly funny, and he parodied the city of Detroit and what was going on quite a bit, and the state of Michigan. So would you please give it up for Count Scary.
Count Scary premiered in 1982 on WDIV Channel 4, Detroit's NBC affiliate. He never had a regular weekly show, but he had a series of specials that would air periodically, usually in prime time. The Count was portrayed by Tom Ryan, who was a well-known radio personality. Back then he was best known for working with Dick Burton at Windsor's legendary radio station AM 800 CKLW. In the summer of '82, Count Scary presented his very first special, where he presented the 3D movie Gorilla at Large. If you wanted to watch, you had to go to your local Wendy's and purchase a pair of 3D glasses, which, coincidentally, were only available with the purchase of a meal.
Now, Count Scary has often been accused of being a blatant ripoff of SCTV's Count Floyd, And that's not an entirely untrue statement. There's definitely some similarities between the two. But I found that Count Scary was funny enough on his own, and I was a fan of both.
Unlike Count Floyd, who was reluctantly played by SCTV news anchor Floyd Robertson, Count Scary was supposed to be a real vampire, albeit a highly incompetent one. In one more similarity to Count Floyd, Count Scary always promised movies that would scare the pants off viewers.
It will be so gruesome, your blood will chill. It will be terribly awful. Terrifying! Aha!
Invariably, he would fail to deliver. The movie would always end up being extremely corny. In his second special, the Count had ordered an extremely scary movie to air on his special, but what was actually delivered was Bikini Beach, with Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. He begrudgingly went ahead and aired the movie anyway. My personal favorite of all the Count Scary specials aired in October of 1983. It was called Count Scary's Halloween 2, and it featured the extremely cheesy Frankenstein vs. Dracula. While the movie aired, Count Scary's assistant had accidentally left the microphones on in the studio, and you could hear them talking through the entire movie. The entire dialogue was hilarious, and it was the first time I had ever seen anyone riffing on a movie. Riffing was later cemented into an art form by the guys at Mystery Science Theater 3000, and more recently, Riff Tracks. Count Scary's segments always included some good remotes which featured some of Detroit's greatest landmarks. There was also a surprising amount of political humor, that is for a TV horror host. There was a great ongoing segment where Count Scary was running for governor of Michigan. The Count also had a brother named Val Scary, who was a cool guy vampire, who drove a Corvette and was a hit with the ladies. In 1984, Count Scary left WDIV and started doing specials on WKBD-TV 50. When he first made the move to Channel 50, he was simply known as the Count, since Channel 4 had claimed ownership of the rights to the name Count Scary. Tom Ryan eventually acquired the rights to both the character and the name. In the 90s, Count Scary continued to appear on WKBD as the host of Shocktober, which ran more recent horror movies. His last appearance on television was in 1996, when he did a crossover special with the Ghoul. The Count continued to appear on the radio from time to time during Tom Ryan's show on WOMC, right up until Tom Ryan's controversial dismissal in 2007. Today, the Count is mostly a memory, but Tom Ryan still shows up on the occasional podcast.
And now it's time for our last host, and this is a guy that needs no introduction. If you grew up in Detroit area, in Windsor or Detroit in the 70s and early 80s, you knew this guy. His name is Sir Graves Gastley.
Sir Graves Gastley was the creation of Cleveland-born actor Lawson J. Deming. Deming got his start doing radio in Cleveland in the 1930s and made the move to television in 1949. Originally, Deming was an afternoon movie host in Cleveland, similar to Detroit's Bill Kennedy. In the early 60s, he landed a job as a puppeteer on a Cleveland children's show called Woodrow the Woodsman, which ran on WNBK Channel 4, Cleveland's NBC affiliate. When WNBK decided to axe the show, they decided to move it to Detroit, and landed a job at WJBK Channel 2, Detroit's CBS affiliate. The show would continue production until 1970. Now, about a year before Lawson Deming arrived in Detroit, WJBK had lost their popular horror host, Morgus the Magnificent, and were looking for a new host for their Saturday afternoon monster movie slot. The station asked Deming to come up with a character and a show outline, and that's just what he did. He invented the persona of Sir Graves Gastley, who kinda looked like a cross between Vincent Price and Burl Ives. And in 1967, Sir Graves' big show, as it was originally known, was on the air. Like many horror hosts, Sir Graves showed some really awful movies, like Horror of Party Beach and The Mole People. But sometimes he showed really good movies. He introduced me and thousands of other youngsters to some of the horror classics. He presented all the Universal classics like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. He showed other classics like King Kong and Carnival of Souls. In presenting such a wide range of films, Sir Graves instilled in me a great appreciation of horror cinema, both the good and the bad, and that stays with me until this day. But, of course, the movies weren't the only aspect of the show that kept us watching. We all looked forward to the segments featuring Sir Graves and his wacky cast of characters, mostly played by Lawson Deming himself. There was the Glob, who would lip-sync to creepy parody songs such as the Monster Mash, and there was Tilly Trollhouse, played by Deming in drag, who presented more musical numbers, and there was Walter, Sir Graves' Ponzi alter ego. There were several more characters featured on the show, and I wish I could show them all to you, but there's not a lot of pictures or video clips of this show in existence. Another thing that made this show great was its interactivity. During various segments, Sir Graves would read viewer mail, announce birthdays, and exhibit drawings sent in by the local audience. Sir Graves' show became so successful that he ended up being syndicated to the Cleveland and Washington, D.C. markets. In addition to his regular Saturday slot, he would occasionally do special presentations after school or in prime time. In 1982, after 15 years on the air, Sir Graves Gastley abruptly stopped airing on WJBK in favor of sports coverage, and in 1983, the show was officially cancelled. Lawson Deming went on to do a few minor TV and film jobs and officially retired a few years later. For the rest of his life, Lawson would always show kind interaction with his fans and would answer as much mail as he could. Lawson Deming passed away in 2007 at the age of 94, and sadly, most of the footage from his show was destroyed. Rumor has it that most of the footage was lost in either a fire or a flood, depending on whom you ask. Some footage did survive and can be viewed online. I recommend checking it out, if only for a glimpse of some of Detroit's finest local programming of the time.
So that's my tribute to the horror hosts of Detroit. It's a shame nowadays with the internet and TV becoming more global that the local personalities have kind of died out. But their presence is still felt. There's a lot of influence of these kind of horror hosts on a lot of today's online personality, and there's still a couple on television. So check your local listings and look them up. And until then, it's Captain Trips 2017 signing off. Happy Halloween, everybody.